to D&D Beyond. I'm really looking forward to today's show because, as you all know from earlier in this week, we got not one but two book announcements this week that we are eagerly counting the time down until. That was a sentence. And here to help me get into it a little bit more, please welcome back Michael Galvis. Hi, how's it going?
Good. I have not slept this week. There is so much content.
it's so it's such a nice problem. But as you all will know, we were here a couple of days ago talking about all the unearthed arcana that came out for the Mages of Strixhaven, and what we didn't really get a chance to do is to get, let's say, the lay of the land. So today's plan is, please leave behind Amy and Michael and meet the names to be determined travel writers who are going to be your guides to the realms of the Feywild and Strixhaven. So we work for a fictional travel agency that I'm inventing as I go. Chat, if you want to help us name it, I would not argue with that. I'm just saying. But our fictional travel agency is working on updating the guides to these very, very interesting parts of the multiverse. And so we are going to share with you everything that we have and what we know about these locations, and some do's and don'ts, and some dangers, and some definite must-see sites. And then if you all have some questions for that, we're going to talk about the Feywild first and then Strixhaven. So if you've got some questions for each of those for our travel guides, for our travel experts, please throw them at us and we will see if we can take a couple of those. Put question in the chat if you would. And with that said, I would like to plan a trip. I'm looking for some place great to go. What can you tell me, fellow travel expert and guide writer, fictional name for Michael here, about the Feywild?
I'm kind of leaning toward maybe Professor Eli, just to, I don't know, call back to my character on our Wednesday game in the House
Yes,
of the Wind.
please. Okay. Professor Eli, you worked on some of these previous editions of the guide, and we're collecting material for the new version now, a concept I in no way stole from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I don't know why you would say that. But as we are preparing to research for the new versions of our travel documents, Professor Eli, what do we know about the Feywild?
Oh boy. So if you like to venture out into the wild, go on long, unending hikes, meet intelligent squirrels, and climb trees that will maybe swat at you or help you on the way up, the Feywild may be the place to go. This is a very wild, very excitable place to travel to. And it's very accessible, actually, from the material plane.
So the Feywild overlaps the material plane. So turn page to the map section here, and it's basically the material plane, but more. So where you see a grove here, you might see a towering forest there, or it might be filled with elemental power in some way. One of my favorite things, and something to watch out for, is, we talked a little bit in our rundown for the book announcement for the Wild Beyond the Witchlight, which is, of course, the reason we're so excited about the Feywild right now. Well, we're always excited about the Feywild, but it's the reason we get to talk about it right now. How do we get to the Feywild, Professor Eli?
So in the material plane, there are these places called Fey crossings. When you, gosh, how do I describe it? So a Fey crossing is a very innocuous kind of like looking area out in the wild that you might come upon. It could be in the Dungeon Master's Guide, they actually give an example. It could be mushrooms that have grown in a circle, and when you step into the circle, you will suddenly be transported to the Feywild. So you can take your vacation to the Feywild pretty much at any time, as long as you know where a Fey crossing is. You could be going out on a walk on your lunch break from work and suddenly find yourself on an impromptu vacation.
So, advice first, maybe just keep like a ready bag with you, especially if
Yeah.
you know you might be around a Fey crossing, because you could go at any time. But of course, you can't be exactly sure when you'll get back. Part of that, of course, is because those crossings don't necessarily stay open. Caution tip. One of my favorite things in the Dungeon Master's Guide description is that the Fey crossings are especially likely to occur in places where the two planes are the most similar. Which means if you take your vacation, if you plan that vacation to the Feywild, and you have neglected that they are planning some construction in your local village, you may have some issues because it will not be so similar getting back. So consult your town planners, your gazetteers, your various things, and cross your fingers that Fey crossing will still be there. They could occur at random. The other problem with how to get back is, of course, when you might arrive back. Any kind of travel hazards we should watch out for there, Professor Eli?
Oh, sure. When you're planning a trip to the Feywild, don't plan on coming back at any given time. If you're going to put in your time off at work and you're like, oh, it's just going to be a weekend trip, maybe put in like maybe a 3-year period of time off. Because when you go into the Feywild and then you come back, there's this really fun effect called time warp, where the amount of time you spent in the Feywild does not line up with the amount of time you've actually been gone in the material plane. So it could be a matter of just, it could be beneficial where you go out to the Feywild, you come back, and it's only been a few minutes that you've been gone, even if it's been a few days in the Feywild, or it could be years, which could be problematic. You might not have a job when you get back.
Many interesting things could happen there. So while I'm going to the Feywild, why might I want to plan my vacation to the Feywild? I will say a couple of the major features. You could see there are a few really interesting courts you could visit. You can meet a lot of interesting creatures, some centaurs, some dryads, some satyrs. You could have the potential for new life adventures in the form of some very dubious bargains. And you could meet a lot of interesting people, like, say, the Eladrin, the Seelie, the Unseelie, the Pixies. A whole lot of Fey creatures make their homes in the Feywild. Professor Eli, which of these highlights would you recommend?
Oh boy, that's kind of hard, but I'm kind of leaning toward the if you want to go to the Eladrin city. I do forget the name of it, but the Eladrin can be so
We
much
have
fun to
records. We
hang
have
out with.
some records that in past travelers who have made it there, made it to a city called Astrazalian, which was the city of Starlight, which spent half the year on the material plane. But we haven't gotten updates on those records, so we're curious. We're checking with our researchers right now on that one.
Yes. But even if that city does not appear, in future editions of our travel book, I still recommend hanging out with some Eladrin. I would keep it to where just like you're partying with them, where you're having very surface level conversations because they can be very temperamental. But if they're, in their summer mode, because the Eladrin are like the elves of the Feywild, and their mood is reflected in like what season they're in. So I believe it's the summer or the spring season where they're just a ball of fun. Um, Aside from
Spring is
those
a little more
guys,
ball of fun. Summer's a little more excited to fight you. But that can be fun in its own way.
that's true. If you're a barbarian going on vacation, look out for your summer Eladrin.
Now, of course, speaking of summer, those two courts that I mentioned are major destinations you might want to put on your agenda or consider avoiding. Because one of the things that we know about the Feywild and that shares this trait with many I'm a break character for a second. Many of the inspiring elements of literature and folklore that are glommed together into the plane of fairy, aka the Feywild, which are some of my very favorite things. They come from multiple regions of the world, sort of filtering together into an idea of the Fey, but the usual shared thread. Warning to travelers. The inhabitants of the Feywild may well take an interest in you. This is not necessarily a good thing. They are neither particularly good nor evil, as so many folks in the world are, but they can find you amusing, and they may have things to offer you, and you may or may not want to do that. We'll get to some do's and don'ts on navigating the Feywild, but traditionally in these sources, Fey and fairy, and even some versions of elves, all of those types of creatures tend to share being amused by the travelers who come to them, potentially drawing entertainment or inspiration from them, but neither particularly being benevolent nor often malicious, just sort of either not caring what happens to the amusing playthings that are other creatures, or any possible variation within them. But it's safe to go in with that assumption. And of course, as we mentioned earlier, if you're looking for some accounts from previous travelers, you may want to check out such works as A Midsummer Night's Dream, Terry Pratchett's Lords and Ladies. We had a bunch more great suggestions in the YouTube comments. Side note, people should go check those out, as people have recorded their own visits to versions of the Plane of Fairy in multiple other editions that we're cross-referencing with. But ours, focusing on the Feywild right now, will lead you to the Summer Court, which is inhabited by the Seelie, one of the major factions in the Feywild. The Summer Court is traditionally led by Queen Titania. Titania and Oberon are, of course, the couple that we know from a lot of folklore from Midsummer Night's Dream, and from some older editions of our travel guides. And it's a little bit safer than some of the other places you might go in the Feywild. There's a long track record that you might be able to entertain or offer something amusing or get help from the folks in the Summer Court. And you might be on a little dicier territory with the Unseelie and the Gloaming Court. Gloaming is a word I looked up. It means twilight or dusk. I could not remember. It's related to the word glow. But the Twilight or Dusk Court, the Gloaming Court, led by the Queen of Air and Darkness, about whom not a lot is known. We have some records from past travels that you might want to stay tuned to dndbeyond.com for more information on. We are running a series of articles right now that is an introduction to the Feywild, so you can get some of this information right now and stay tuned for the final part of that series. But the Queen of Air and Darkness leads the Gloaming Court, mostly composed of the Unseelie, and traditionally it's more wintry. It's a little less hospitable, a little less eager to show you that they're interested in your activities or help you out. But like most things in the Feywild, it's not impossible. So if stranded, you may be able to get help at these courts. Just, watch out. Speaking of, yeah.
While you are talking about the courts, I would recommend to travelers, if you do happen to hang out with the Seelie, don't mention the Unseelie in a positive light, and vice versa. They do have a sort of rivalry. The two courts aren't exactly in like open war or anything, but they do have a rivalry between the queens who preside over them. So probably, if you're hanging out with your satyr friend, maybe don't mention, any of your any Unseelie folk that you happen to befriend on your travels.
It's always best, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. So while you're traveling through the Feywild, there's beautiful landscapes, there's incredible flora and fauna around you, there are very interesting people and unpeople to meet, but there are also, of course, some dangers, and we wouldn't be much of a travel guide if we didn't talk to you a little bit about some hazards you might encounter in the Feywild. One of those, of course, is the wildlife, displacer beasts, a lot of various dangerous folks hanging out, or creatures that ordinarily would not be much of a threat might be a little bit harder to handle in the Feywild. And we also have, I believe, a figure known as Baba Yaga. Now, we know that she's done a few good things in her life. She raised a daughter named Tasha, and we're all pretty excited about that. But you wouldn't necessarily want to wander by mistake into the domain of Baba Yaga, who's, of course, a figure from real folklore from another region of the world, mushed together with the British and Greek and all the other influences that make this wonderful domain. Any other dangers that we should look out for, Professor Eli?
Did you mention the Fomorian?
I don't believe we did. Watch out
we
for
might
caves. Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's a subsection in our travel book about the Fomorians. So if you're from the material plane, you might be familiar with the Underdark, where malicious creatures like to live in deep caverns that wind and maze their way through under the safe and wonderful surface world that we all know and love. Well, the Feywild has their own version of the Underdark, and Fomorians tend to be, they tend to populate their version of the Underdark. Uh, Not the kindest people. Lots of scattered tribes. These people don't do well with collaborating with one another in order to have like these massive attacks on the surface world. But they do have a habit of occasionally going to the surface world and I don't know, capturing people, hurting people. So
What we know about the Fomorians, which we cross-reference with our friends, the travel writers who helped contribute to a certain thing called the Monsters Manual, they let us know about the Fomorians and the way that they were involved previously in a war with the other inhabitants of the Feywild, and were eventually driven into the Underdark, and are notable for wanting power, wanting to corrupt others, and I'm very curious what our researchers are going to turn up on the Fomorians as we go forward, but best to avoid if possible. Recommendation, travel guide. Do's and don'ts while you are in the Feywild. Don't sign anything. Try to avoid making bargains. It will be tough. They are very good at bargains in the Feywild, but read the fine print. Now, easy to say, tough to do, as many, many travelers to the Feywild before have discovered. But it's always best to listen for when you're making an exchange. What's the true price in the Feywild? Always just a question to keep in mind.
yeah,
Any other
I
advice,
like to
Professor Eli?
yeah, kind of on the point that you were making. I like to think of it as like so if you've ever seen a devil's contract, you already are pretty suspicious because there's a devil in front of you. But in the Feywild, it could be maybe there's a really cute little I don't know, satyr man who wants to cut a deal with you for in exchange for goods.
That
I
sounds
know
nice.
it might, yeah, right. It doesn't seem like it would be problematic at all, but suddenly in the contract you find out that you've agreed to work for him for 150 years or so. So you just want to keep an eye out for it. I know that when you go to the Feywild, every creature looks so adorable. Everyone looks so, for the most part, kind and welcoming. But yeah, just to my fellow professor's point, be wary of what you sign. And then adding on to the dangers, we kind of touched on this before. Very innocuous looking creatures, like a squirrel or maybe a rabbit, could look just like your typical squirrel or rabbit from the material plane. But it's very important to remember that the Feywild is full of magic. It is a very magic dense uh, plane of existence. And even these sorts of smaller, very kind looking creatures can be very dangerous. They could also be intelligent. So if you're going to be traveling to the Feywild, I highly recommend that you maybe practice a vegan diet. You don't want to go hunting in this area. You don't really want to be trying to set traps or anything because you may find yourself either caught in the trap or I don't know a rabbit fireballs you in the face when you capture it.
And of course, some of our other previous travelers to the Feywild have left us some records indicating that just food in general might be a point of caution when visiting the realm of the Feywild. So if you are packing that bag that you want to keep ready in case that crossing opens up in front of you, maybe put some snacks in there that you know what exactly they'll do. And remember that an offer of food could be a bargain. And it's important to, what did we say? Not sign anything while you're in the Feywild. That said, you will find many opportunities for adventure. I was gonna say memorable adventure, but that's one more little hazard that we may or may not have mentioned. We've gotten a lot of great information back from our researchers on previous trips to the Feywild, but we have encountered some problems when gathering that material. Professor Eli, why is that?
I don't remember. I could have sworn, I did take some time off last year to travel to the Feywild, but I don't think I actually ended up going. So I'm afraid I don't recall.
Indeed. One of the travel hazards you may encounter on your way to or from the Feywild, not every time, but enough to keep it interesting, is that when you come back, you may either have dim or no memories of your adventure. So if you are saving up your hard earned gold, important to bear in mind that maybe commission a few more paintings while you're there, try to bring them back with you, and then maybe you can reconstruct it or find someone with some restoration. Just plan ahead. Plan ahead is the key, really, to travel.
That explains a lot. Thank you.
Also, you said you'd be gone for 3 days and it was a month. Just so you know, it's fine though. We covered for you.
Well, I
We
was wondering why I was put on probation.
have We have a couple questions from the chat to close out our Journey to Feywild travel guide advice. I believe. Oh, actually, okay, not a question, but Oh Chili Draw says, you may not want to go. I love the idea of a Jumanji style Feywild game. Please use that. Please put it in your games. That's a great idea. Is that a child's game with toy pieces comes into your local village, and through interacting with those pieces, some kids are gonna get lost in the Feywild. That's a great idea.
I
You are.
love that. I love that so much. I am going to make a magic item for that for my game. Wow. Dang, that is good.
So hopefully, lots more to learn about the Feywild as we get closer to the Wild Beyond the Witchlight. But we will keep collecting all of our tips. This has been Professor Eli, and we'll just go with it. I'm Professor Scrumble. My family, we get into a lot of very different professions. My cousin gets into all kinds of shenanigans. But I am a travel writer myself. So from Professor Eli and Professor Scrumble, safe journeys to the Feywild, and I hope your adventure is one to remember.
It's D&D.